'Twas Years Before Christmas by Brian Cretney. Did Christmas begin just inside this barn door, or did it begin many years long before? "'Twas years before Christmas, before time began. God's marvelous, massive, miraculous plan was thought of right there in God's gift-giving heart. But what was that plan? And where would he start? Part 1. The Garden. 'Twas years before Christmas, 4,000 or so, when Adam was formed from the dust down below. God breathed in his nostrils, alive he became, then made him a wife, and Eve was her name. We walked with our God in the cool of the day. We talked and we listened to all he would say.
Of all these great trees you may freely partake, except for that tree.
Then along came a snake. That sneaky old serpent was quick to inform that following our heart was simply the norm. He promised that if we would eat from that tree, we'd be our own gods. At last you'll be free. Now, sadly, we listened, believing that fraud. We willfully chose to ignore our good God, who gave us abundance, all trees but that one. The serpent just sneered, "God is spoiling your fun." We tasted that fruit, and we felt the cool wind. Deep down in our hearts, we both knew we had sinned.
Get out from this garden,
God said, heavy-hearted. With shame and with sorrow we sadly departed. Yet God, in his heart, had a marvelous plan. A plan that would come through a regular man named Seth, a dear son of both Adam and Eve. A plan so divine only God could conceive. For centuries later, from Seth's family tree, came Noah, a builder, as soon we shall see. He once got a project directly from God, which all of the people agreed was quite odd. Part 2. The Boat. 'Twas years before Christmas, 3,000 or so, and sin filled the earth, God's heart filled with woe. God warned me of judgment. His patience wore thin, for though he is loving, he won't ignore sin. I did as God told me. I built a great ark while warning the people who walked in the dark. I finished the boat. God closed the door. Thud. Then, just as God promised, he sent the great flood. God rained down his judgment, for sin has a cost, and all human beings but 8 were then lost. It pained God to do this. His heart ached with sorrow, but sending a rainbow meant hope for tomorrow. Yes, God in his heart had a marvelous plan. A plan he'd fulfill through a regular man named Shem, one of Noah's 3 hard-working boys. This plan would be bursting with heavenly joys, for centuries later, from Shem's family tree, came Patriarch Abraham. Blessed was he. But why was he special? What part would he play in bringing about such a blessing today? Part 3. The Lamb. 'Twas years before Christmas, 2,000 about, when Patriarch Abraham let out a shout. God gave me some news of great joy and glad cheer.
you are having a son in your 100th year, and from your own son shall all people be blessed, and grow as a nation beyond all the rest. Your offspring will be as the stars of the sky.
Though God, at that point, chose to not explain why. But there was no doubt that Jehovah was true. My God, I am certain that I can trust you. And just as God promised, my Isaac was born, then grew, till that day that my poor heart was torn.
Please offer your son as a gift unto me,
said great God Jehovah, as plain as could be. I don't understand, but your will I obey. I placed my dear son on God's altar that day. My knife was positioned and ready to drop when God spoke like thunder.
Now, Abraham, stop! I see you are willing to give me your best. Now watch how such faith shall be royally blessed.
A stir in the thicket, a tangled up ram to take Isaac's place.
But one day, a lamb I'll provide that is spotless and pure to die in man's place and provide man a cure.
So still, in God's heart was that marvelous plan. That plan he passed down through a regular man named Isaac, then Jacob, and others came later. We can't stop quite yet, for God's plan was still greater. For centuries later, from this family tree, a shepherd named David appeared on the scene. Though just a young boy with a sling and a stone, God placed him as king upon Israel's throne. Part 4. The Crown. 'Twas years before Christmas, 1000 I'd say, when King David ruled in a wonderful way. A lion? A bear? A giant to fight? I go in the name of the Lord in his might. Although I am known for my great love for God, I too have a record that deeply is flawed. For rather than helping my army to win, I stayed home and lost in a battle of sin. Not many years later, the nation was split. Our poor little country had taken a hit. God's people were captives, but still it got worse. For 400 years they lived under God's curse. Yet still, in God's heart was that marvelous plan. That plan he passed down through a regular man who came from King David's own family tree. A Nazarene? Joseph? But how could this be? Part 5. The Manger. 'Twas months before Christmas, 9 months just about, when Joseph's fiancée named Mary found out that part of God's plan was to visit this earth. He'd come as a baby, arriving by birth. But there was more news that would shock her that day, for God, in a special, miraculous way, would place in her womb his very own son. She simply replied, "May God's will be done." 'Twas weeks before Christmas. Augustus decreed, "A census of all in the earth is in need. I want to make sure you're all paying your taxes." So back to their hometowns went people in masses. 'Twas days before Christmas, and Joseph gets ready. He helps Mary onto a donkey. "Now, steady." They set off for Bethlehem, birthplace of David. At last, in the distance, they see it. We made it! 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the town not a single hotel nor a bed can be found. Both Mary and Joseph are tired and weary. The only available option looks dreary. A stable? A trough for a bed for a baby? We must be mistaken, an oversight maybe, for coming from glory, yet crowded by cattle, will be Lord Jehovah Almighty in battle. 'Twas the very first Christmas. Dear Jesus is born, and God's wondrous plan ushers in a new morn. Those parents are caring, the angels declaring, the shepherds are joyful and silently staring. Some wise men detect an unusual star. They know God is here, so they travel from far. The hope of all ages, oh grand celebration, this baby shall bless every kindred and nation. However, Part 6. The snake, the ark, the lamb, the crown. 'Twas years after Christmas, about 33, when Jesus, the grown-up, was nailed to a tree. Forsaken by God and forsaken by man, was that really part of God's marvelous plan? That wonderful secret God passed down through men, from Adam to Seth, then Noah to Shem, from Abraham, Isaac, to David the king, through Joseph's wife Mary to this tragic scene. But yes, listen on, let our wondering souls hush. Because of this Christ, that old serpent was crushed, and just like that ark, he now guards all of those who obey the gospel before the doors closed. Because, like that lamb that was promised of old, he died in our place. What a sight to behold! Beaten and bruised, though completely unflawed, then, taking our blame, he was punished by God. Yes, this was the plan, but not the whole thing. For up from the grave he arose, the great King, ascending his throne as the Lamb that was slain, which David but pictured in his earthly reign. Part 7. You. Now there's just one part to be added. It's true. God's wonderful, marvelous plan includes you. He's patiently waiting for you to step in and let him forgive you and cleanse you from sin. So this very night, when all through your house no creatures are stirring, not even a mouse, remember this plan, born in God's heart of love, passed down through the ages, the babe from above.